Hi everyone, my name is Petra. I'm Charlotte, and today we will be interviewing U.S. Ambassador to the United States and the Netherlands, Mr. Pete Hoekstra. Thank you for having us.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And today we will be discussing the general U.S. elections, the presidential elections, and I think we'll just dive right in. So first.
That's not true.
No?
No, I will be in Michigan personally. I will be in Michigan on Election Day, and I expect that I will be able to go vote at my polling station. Really, in the United States, we have 50 different elections. Every state is responsible for conducting the balloting in their particular state. There are a couple of states that do all mail-in voting, and that's how they historically do it. And then this year there will also be some states that have more extensive mail-in voting than what they normally do. But there will still be a lot of Americans who will be going to their voting place on Election Day to cast their ballot.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because that's what the question is about. Because of voting by mail, people are concerned that the counting of the votes might go slow, and that there might be a lower promise of security that all the votes will be counted. And well, should people be concerned about that?
Not because there's an inherently flawed system with mail-in voting or whatever. It's just that if you have voted for a particular way, meaning you've got absentee ballots and you may have some mail-in voting, most people go and cast their votes on Election Day. Then you go to a totally different format. So it's not that one format is inherently better than another. The uncertainty comes in. Have you put everything in place to make sure that this new system that you're using, you've had maybe 2 or 3 months to implement it, and you may be collecting millions of votes. Have you got all your bases covered? I mean, I think we even saw that here in the Netherlands with one of the political parties that they normally have a convention. People would vote at their convention, and they said, "Hey, we're not going to have a convention this year. We're going to do it online." And then what they found out is that we didn't cover all the bases. It appears that someone was able to, an ethical hacker, was able to hack into our system and maybe change a couple of votes. So you know what? We're going to have a rerun election. So that is the concern that certain states or states may not have had time to go through all the checks to ensure that there would be integrity in the voting process. It's super important. Yeah, we're only electing a president. We're only electing 35 senators and 435 members to the House. So yeah, it's absolutely critical we get it right. Well, if there are chaotic conditions, the lines don't call into question the integrity of the vote. The lines call into question who's actually going to stand in line.
But you have to have the patience to wait.
That's right. You have to have the patience to wait, and some people may not. So that may affect the number of people that go vote. But if when you're voting or shortly afterwards, people identify irregularities which may or may not be legitimate, it does call into question the integrity of the vote. And that's the last thing that we want to have happen. Elections in America are divisive enough that we don't have to get to a position where people are debating whether it was a legitimate election or not, 4 days, 5 days, 2 weeks after the election. We want to make sure that the candidates that are selected enter office with a clear mandate, meaning that they have won the election fair and square.
Okay. Do you think that is likely that will happen? That neither of the sides will complain?
Oh, I'm sure there'll be plenty of complaining. Okay, and so, but it will depend on. There are people on both sides of this who are saying that there's a possibility that their candidate will win with a landslide. Okay, if that happens, there won't be any questions. It's kind of like, oh, wait a minute, this person got 350 electoral votes. They only need 270. Okay, yeah, there may be some questionable voting, but you know what? There's not nearly enough questionable voting that would change the outcome of the election. Now, if you go back to 2016, the president won Michigan by 11,000 votes. He won Pennsylvania by a very narrow margin. He won Wisconsin by a relatively narrow margin. And if you find an election like that in 2020, where one of the candidates narrowly wins the electoral votes of a particular state, total nationwide popular vote doesn't make a difference. Did you win this state? Did you win that state? And if we find that candidates are winning a bunch of states, but by very narrow margins, and there's some question about the integrity of the vote, that will create complaining. It will create uncertainty and lots of disappointment. What I think most Americans hope is that we have the election on November 3, then on November 4, there will be a clear mandate without question that this candidate or that candidate won the election.
If we compare elections in the US and here in Europe, the voter
I've never seen an election here in the Netherlands yet, so I'm looking forward to it.
but the voter turnout in the US is usually much lower.
Yes.
Do you think that this year it will be even lower because of people voting by mail, or
It's going to be much higher.
you think so?
Yes.
Okay.
It's going to be much higher. This election has captured the attention of lots of Americans. So whether it's early voting, whether it's mail-in ballots, or whether it's going to vote on election day, I expect that we will see a record turnout in this election cycle. Yes.
And if that
It
happens,
still will not approach the levels that you have here in the Netherlands, but no, it will have a record turnout.
if that happens, do you think also in the future people will vote by mail in the US? Do you think it will change the system?
I don't know. Okay, I'm old-fashioned on this. I like to wait till all the information is in, which means that even the weekend before an election, you may get some new information. I've probably made up my mind as to who I'm going to vote for president, but there may be other items on the ballot that you're saying I want to get some more information, and so then we like to go vote on election day. But the COVID, I think, hopefully is going to be a unique phenomenon. We will get through it, and I don't know if it will fundamentally change the way that we vote. I mean, and you keep bringing up mail voting.
Yeah.
I know that someone that I work with, they've cast their absentee ballot, but they did it through computer. They voted from their computer here at the embassy. They received a ballot in a secure form. They voted, and they sent it back in a secure form. So it had nothing to do with the mail. So, as technology continues to evolve, as security capabilities continue to evolve on the internet, you may go right past mail balloting, and you may go right to this direct online internet voting. In 2016, everybody, if you're reading the polls and believing the polls, everybody expected Hillary Clinton. She was going to be the next president. We found out a couple days later that she was not going to be the next president. And so, I'll give you one example. There's a close Senate race, South Carolina. Lindsey Graham is running for re-election. And I've been following the polls on that campaign because Lindsey is a friend of mine. I served in the House of Representatives with Lindsey, so he and I know each other pretty well. And, for the last 3-4 weeks, it showed that he was almost in a dead heat with his Democrat challenger. I woke up this morning, I'm looking through the news, and I see that there's a new poll out that from the New York Times that shows he has a 6-point lead. Well, in a Senate race, that's a big shift. So it's like, really that many voters changed their mind over the last week or two? Unlikely. What were the parameters of the polls? 2 weeks ago, who did they poll? How many people did they poll versus the one that the New York Times just ran? Polling has a lot to do to build up its credibility in America right now. They were flat out wrong in 2016. The vast majority of them were. And so the question is, have they identified why they were wrong in 2016, and have they patched up their system so they will be more accurate reflectors of what's going to happen on election day this year than what they were 4 years ago?
Some argue that the best way to predict the outcome is to take a look at the opinion polls 6 months before the election, so before the campaigns. Do you think that campaigns are still playing a big role?
There was an Odd Day article that came out in the middle of August. Headlines across 2 pages. Biden will win. Okay. You're a newspaper, if that's what you want to publish, go ahead. In American politics, I think it's a little early to predict, whether you're predicting in the middle of August, before either party has their convention. And, you take a look at today, what's happened in the last 30 days. The president got COVID. Supreme Court justice died. The president appointed a new candidate to be the Supreme Court. There are Senate hearings. So you go through all that. Events and campaigns do make a difference. Yes, I believe so. We've had international meddling in American elections for probably the last 100 years.
So you don't think that it will change anything this year, like it did maybe the last elections?
I'm not sure. I don't think it changed the last election.
Were there any measures taken?
There are always measures taken to try to identify international meddling in our elections. But Russia has an interest in who wins our elections. China has an interest in who wins our elections. The only difference today is the sophistication of the tools that foreign actors have to influence our elections. They're much more immediate. They're much cheaper. Everybody has access to it, and so you're always working it. Twitter and Facebook have put in place new protocols to protect voters from malicious or incorrect information. And we've seen in the last few days, Twitter got into a huge problem with this. They were censoring conservative Republican messages, and the CEO of Twitter came out, a couple of days later, and said, "Yeah, we made a mistake." I'm very concerned about some of the measures that we sometimes put in to protect the voter may actually do more damage to the democratic process. I don't want Facebook, I don't want Twitter, with as big as they are and the reach that they have, I don't want them becoming the censors for what the American public may or may not say on their platforms, which they are doing. That's a problem. In this case, when Twitter admits that they made a mistake and that they were censoring conservative Trump messaging, that's wrong. Which means the mechanisms that they put in place to try to protect people aren't working. And so Twitter has a responsibility to go back and identify what the problems are and how this occurred and how they can address it in the future. It happens, okay? But
I would say it's a big issue.
it is a big issue. Yeah, it happens. But yeah, it is absolutely it is a big issue. Yes.
So the increasing role of tech companies and their influence on the elections, do you think this is always an issue, or is it more like 2020, its development, of course there's tech companies involved in the elections, or how should we see this situation? Is it always negative?
No, I mean, there's lots of things with technology that are positive. Okay? You can go, if you're interested in a particular election or a particular candidate, you can go on the internet and they will have a website where you can learn a whole lot about who they are, what they stand for, what they've done. You can go take a look at websites that give you a lot of information that says, here's why you ought to vote for her. And you could have a website that says, hey, here's a whole bunch of reasons why you shouldn't vote for her. And so people have much more access on multiple platforms to become more informed on the candidates and the issues. Now, it also puts on them a huge data load, a data dump into your head that says, look at all of this information that's available on these candidates. How reliable is her analysis of this person, right? Yeah. Who is this person? What's their bias? Are they just a good public, figure that's trying to really help voters, or do they have a real bias in their point of view? And I can kind of believe what she's saying, but take it with a grain of salt. Because she really has a problem with this person. Maybe she's not that trustworthy. Most of the time she's trustworthy, but when she's talking about this candidate, maybe not so trustworthy. So in that way, there's been a tremendous number of positives that have come with technology, but with anything new, in that there's always the possibility that something negative will happen. Sure. What about the future? All we know is that through technology, there will be more data available more quickly on each and every one of us. Sometimes I'm scared with how much different platforms or organizations may know about me. Going from your grocery store that can see everything you buy, when you buy it, and those types of things. And from that information, they can make lots of determination as to who you are. Probably tell you roughly how old you are, roughly how much money you make, roughly whether you're married, whether you have kids, whether you're conservative, whether you're liberal. They can figure that all. And then when you take the information from there, from other social media and all of that, and put it in one place, wow, they have a pretty good picture of each and every one of us. I think it's pretty clear that, and this is why I think there will be a record turnout of voters. The choice is very clear. The two candidates are very, very different. The political parties are very, very different in terms of how they view the past, but more importantly, how they view the future, what they want to get done. Debates are an opportunity to inform the public, to inform voters of the candidate. The candidate can make their positions known. They also then have the opportunity to voice their observations about why the other candidate's policies or views are things that not disqualify them, but would be why you wouldn't want to vote for them. Typically, they're done in a slightly more organized way and a structured way than what we saw in the first presidential debate. We'll see what happens in the third debate. And it will be the third debate scheduled, but it will only be the second one that happens.
Do you think that the debates are nowadays only for entertainment, or are they really influencing how people are voting?
Oh, I still think that they can influence votes. You have some people who really want to go take a look at each of the candidates and see how they interact, and you get a better sense for their personality and those kinds of things. So debates still matter. Candidates spend a tremendous amount of time preparing for these debates, which tells you that they believe debates matter. Well, I mean, there will be two things that you look for in the American election. Two main themes, I think, and which theme dominates leading up to the election will probably have an impact on who is selected. So one is, what has been the performance on managing COVID, and what is the strategy for containing it and handling it moving forward. So that's one theme of people should be watching. The other is, what's going to happen with the economy? Which candidate, which set of ideas do you have the most confidence in that will put Americans back to work, will get the economy moving, and those types of things. That it's those two themes that candidates will really be focused on. We call them bread and butter issues. Okay? People obviously want to feel secure and safe from their health standpoint. That is a basic need. So that's the whole COVID debate. Second is they want to be at work. They want to have an economic opportunity. Older people want it for their kids and their grandkids. Kids and young adults, they want it for themselves because they want to work. They want a future. Yeah, it will be somewhat affected by COVID, but in many ways it will be handled within those two themes. The whole threat from China is about economic security. What do we do to make sure that people in America continue to have the opportunity for high quality, high paying jobs? What is the threat from China that will determine or have an impact on the kind of jobs and the kind of economy that we will have in the U.S.? Always underlying currents of international affairs, but right now the activity in the area of terrorism is not as high as it was a few years ago when ISIS controlled, an area the size of Pennsylvania, these types of things across the Syrian and the Iraq border. Yes, we are concerned about North Korea, we're concerned about Russia, we're concerned about the military buildup of China, and so those are, but right now those are not the frontline issues. Well, sure, yeah, they're long-term issues. I'm just telling you what I think right now, what American voters are looking for, and what they're going to analyze it on. I think it'll strengthen it. We've seen in a number of different ways where there's been tremendous cooperation between the United States and the EU in responding to the COVID pandemic. Companies like Philips, Dutch company, make all of their respirators in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. and the rest of the world wanted more respirators. So Philips asked the U.S. government to take certain steps which would enable them to build more respirators.
So it's mainly business-based.
Well, that was a business base, but it's a healthcare basis. To keep people alive, we need more respirators. Okay, so it was all about health. It wasn't about the business. The second thing is you've got vaccine development. You have Johnson and Johnson, which has a subsidiary here in the Netherlands called Janssen, and so but their vaccine development, a lot of that work will be done right here in the Netherlands, and production, if they get to an appropriate vaccine, the production most likely, or a good part of it, will take place here in the Netherlands. And you've got AstraZeneca coming out of the UK. You've got multiple government agencies, U.S. and Europe, pouring billions of dollars into getting to a vaccine, getting to improved treatments, and we're collaborating. And we're finding that America and the EU, in the COVID crisis, we are much stronger and much more effective when we work together. I think what you all also will see coming out of this is that we will recognize that we cannot be dependent on someone outside of Europe or the United States for a lot of our basic personal protective equipment, PPE. That we're gonna have to develop people who can make that stuff either in Europe or the U.S. I don't care where we make it. Most countries don't care whether it's made in the U.S. or Europe because we're trusted allies. We know that if the U.S. is making it, we will share it with Europe. We know that if we have a high degree of confidence that if the production for this type of stuff finds a place here in Europe, we're okay because we trust that Europe will share that. No, it's not inevitable. We can't allow that. We cannot allow for key healthcare products, key technologies, and data, those types of things, key industries, will have to have a base of production within our framework of trusted allies. We cannot put the West in a position where we have to rely on untrustworthy allies. Excuse me, they're not allies. Untrusted countries to provide us with these basic essentials. We cannot put ourselves in that position. That would be ideal. The United States would like nothing more than have a great relationship with China, where China respects intellectual property. China opens up its markets in the same way that Europe and the United States has opened up its markets. That China would allow American and European companies to establish footholds in China the same way that Chinese companies can do it in the West. We would love that to be the case, but right now that is not the case. And so until that happens, we don't put China into that category of trusted allies. If China changes its behavior and starts meeting those requirements, then it would be fine. Then it's kind of like, okay, China has moved into that category of trusted allies, which means that it can fully participate. But until that happens, we need to make sure that we have alternatives to China for some of these basic, essential products that we need.
If we go a bit back to the question about international affairs and voting, do you think average American voter really cares how the president is handling the international affairs?
You do the polling, and
but is this really something that matters?
Well, let me answer. What polling will tell you is that typically international affairs are not at the top of American concerns. It is about their economy, it's their security, and those types of things. And it may be 5th, 6th, 7th on the list. Unless you're, you guys are way too young. But unless you're involved in a Vietnam War, right, where Americans are dying, unless you're involved in the Iraq War, you're involved in Afghanistan, and we're still there, but our footprint in Iraq and Afghanistan today is much smaller than it was in 2004. So unless you're really involved in those types of international activities, international relations, how a president is handling it, vision a candidate may have for how that will work, falls down the list of priorities for American voters.
And one last question. Do you have any, how would you advise us as a political science students? Is there something that you would like us to pay greater attention to when we're following the elections?
I think you're doing a great job in terms of just actually doing this program today, all right, and helping to educate other students. And thank you very much for being able to provide the American perspective through the American ambassador. Sometimes I read your media and it's kind of like they give the American perspective and I can't even identify with it. Kind of like, where do they come up with this stuff? So I very much appreciate that opportunity. And I would encourage, you as young adults to follow this, because I would always say politicians, and your politicians are younger than America's politicians. Okay, you take a look at our Congress, and they're quite a bit older than what the members of your parliament are, or the two candidates. All right, I'm sorry, they're not designing their future anymore. Okay, all right, but they are designing your future, and so whether you like politics or not, you will be impacted by the decisions that are made in American elections. But there you don't have a voice or a vote. But this is, I think, the encouraging thing here in the Netherlands. In America, a lot of young people do not vote. In the Netherlands, I don't think that's true. I think most young people do vote. And I think that's a very, very positive characteristic, because the people that you send to The Hague, that you send to Brussels, they are the ones that are designing your future. How competitive will Europe be in the future? Will Europe be competitive globally against countries out of Asia? What will be your relationship with the United States? We would hope that your politicians would design a relationship that builds off of the strength of the United States and Europe, and recognize that working together will create more opportunities for young people in both parts of the world. There are people in Europe who disagree with that strategy. But become informed on that, voice your opinions, and become involved in the process. It'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you
for the interview, and thank you for having us here.